When it comes to international certifications, regardless of the language or target language that you're studying, there are a few things, multiple things, when it comes to the exams, that if you knew, you could be 10 times more effective. Now, are these tips, advice, secrets? Well, one could say that these are practical characteristics, fundamental characteristics of the way these exams function. And once you understand this, you will perform 50 times better. And this can be with your English, your French, Italian, Mandarin, Japanese. It really doesn't matter what your target language is if you want to be internationally certified in order to boost your CV or resume. So whether it be for work or whether it be because you want to take that class or enter a university or move to another country, it is what it is. You will need the international certification. Now, why should you listen to me? There are plenty of YouTubers out there who are frauds. And what they do, particularly in the language space, they will tell you, oh, these are the secrets to pass an exam, as well they never tell you. But how do they gather that information? How did they acquire it? The first red flag that you need to be very cognizant about is the fact that, okay, so this YouTuber is telling me how to pass a C1, a B2 in this language. Did they do it? Because unless you've had the experience, what you're doing when you're teaching people secrets and advice on how to pass these exams, excel, is secondhand information. You learned it from someone else, you copied someone else's video. That's garbage. It's rubbish. Your information needs to come from a direct experience. So why should you listen to me? Of course, I've taken several tests, international tests and certifications. I'll tell you more about it. But the key is not even that. The key is, I used to be an examiner, as you can tell from the title of the video. And when I say examiner, I want to qualify that. If you want to skip this part, and just trust me, bro, just accept the trust me, bro, because you really want to go to the meat and bones, get to the meat and bones of this video, then you can skip it, not a problem. I'm not going to get offended. But for those who want to stay, here is what it is. I worked for years as a language teacher, a decade about, more or less. And I was teaching in high school, but then I was also chosen to teach in like middle school, sometimes elementary school, all the way up to teaching teachers. So teaching people that were going to teach in high school, and then a couple of collaborations within the university teaching space. Then I was offered a job. This is when I was living back in Italy. Now I'm living in the US. Then I was offered a job. They're like, hey, Sitting Guilds of London, which is a major certification body in England, based in London, they were looking for examiners. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So I got the training for that. And what I did is that I became a invigilator. Then I became an interlocutor. And then I became an assessor. So I did all of it. That's why the advice I'm going to give you today doesn't come from just a guy who took the exam, C2, maximum votes, maximum marks, but it comes from someone who was behind the scene. I was the guy. What is an invigilator? Is someone who checks written exams. I was the guy in the room while people were doing the test, and I became an interlocutor. So the guy that during spoken tests and exams speaks to you, reads the questions, understands the format, begins the recording, sends it back to London. And then the assessor, the guy who listens to the recordings and gives the marks and decides whether you pass or not. I did all of it. Okay, so that's why the advice I'm going to give you today is real. And with that out of the way, let's begin with the first piece of advice. Okay, so the first thing that we need to understand when it comes to taking exams is that usually we think of the difficulty of an exam based on the European frame of reference. So are you trying to take an A1? Are you taking a B1? Are you taking a C2? But it's not. That's a little bit kind of the external layer of difficulty. Of course, the one you choose will determine how complicated of a test and how long of a test is going to be as well. But really, your first area of difficulty, your first obstacle is time. Time management was during a test was one of the first skills that I would always try to teach my students when I was preparing them for taking the test. What this means is that, for instance, I'll give you just a practical thing. So it's not just theory. You're sitting down, you're doing your test. How do these tests work? When it's the written one, you've got a reading and comprehension section, you've got a listening section, usually begins with the listening, and then you've got a writing, right? You need to create an essay and whatnot. And then there is the spoken one. It can be on the same day. It can be on a separate day. It's considered a separate test with its own separate certification. Usually depends whether it's Cambridge or Trinity, what have you, but still, kind of function this way. Let's say you're doing your reading and comprehension and you get stuck. Like you don't know what a specific question is and what the answer is. Skip it. You have to skip. Learning to skip is fundamental during international tests. So you are on the second set of exercises. Say that you've got, 8, depending on the exam. You've got 8, and these all are reading and comprehension. The first thing you need to do is understand that sometimes you don't know and you get stuck on a question. You have to skip it and keep going. Because if you don't, remember, time is your enemy. So if it takes you too long to answer that, even if you answer it perfectly, but you wasted 15 minutes on it, whereas you were supposed to do it in 3, that's a problem. So you do the first exercise, goes well, great. Second exercise, you're stuck, leave it. Third exercise, do it. Fourth exercise, do it. And then when you're done with the other ones, let's say that the fifth one is also a problem, halfway through, you're struggling, skip it. Go to the 6th, 7th, 8th, you're done. You go back to the second one, you spend a little time in it. Go back to the 5th one, you spend a little time in it. So whenever you are facing trouble in your test, skip the section that is giving you trouble, move forward so you ensure that you complete the things that are not giving you trouble, because of course if you're prepared, right, if you spend time preparing for the test, not everything is going to be a problem, otherwise it means you chose the wrong level. So if the level is correct and you are okay with those sections of the test that you can do relatively quickly, that's good. You gain time that way, because imagine maybe in section 4 you were expected to do it in 4 minutes, but you did it in 2 because you're really good at that. Great. Now you have 2 extra minutes that you can reuse for section 2 where you were struggling. And then at one point, if you still struggle, just move on. It's not a big deal. It's fine. That's the first thing. Second thing, do not go and take the test without having done mock test practice. My suggestion, and it varies depending on personal experience with text and levels of anxiety, because you do have to consider personality as well when you prepare a student. There isn't like a single end-all be-all answer, but in general, I suggest students to try tests, but the mock version, practice tests, between 10 to 15 times before you go and take the test. This is important because, once again, you can be really good at the language aspect of it. Maybe you're good with vocabulary. Your pronunciation is great. That only works for the, of course, spoken part. I'll tell you how important it is, because that's often misunderstood. So we'll discuss it, but it's only for the spoken part. But whatever your skill level is in the language, if you don't understand the test mechanics, those will slow you down. And that's going to be a problem. Once again, why? Because time is your problem. For instance, usually a written test can take 3 hours, 3.5, kind of depends. Used to be 3.5, then I reduced it to 3, but it's level-based. But that means that you kind of have to segment it and spend the correct amount of time on everything. And therefore, being familiar with the mechanics is fantastic, because you move through it and you're like, oh yeah, of course, now it's reading. I know that. Oh yeah, the listening takes about 35 minutes. You already know that. And everything is repeated twice. Okay, I know that. But perhaps in this section, they only do it once. I already know that. It's section 9, for instance. The more familiar you are with the test, the better. Because that way you don't have to struggle against the mechanics and understanding what's going on, while at the same time trying to figure out what the heck they are on about with the language that you're trying to get a certification on. So that's another thing. You might think 15 sounds like a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's usually for people that are really, people that get worried during tests and exams. If you're someone who's like, it's a test, just a Tuesday, I would still do it 10 times, just to be sure, because why not? I mean, you're paying for the test. It's not like money grows on trees. So just make sure that you pass it when you go. So do it 10 times. Do 10 mock tests, so that also you can see what your average is. Because if you only do 1, I did a mock test, it went well, great. But if you did 3, and 1 goes well, and 2 go terrible, now you have an average. You might want to understand what the problem is. Why is it not going well? If you have 10, that gives you a monumental situation. It's like sort of range, and it can also help you identify your weaknesses. Maybe your weakness is phrasal verbs. Maybe you struggle with those. Maybe modal verbs, or maybe your weakness is the past. You have a problem with irregular past. At least you know. Or maybe you are lacking vocabulary, and therefore that could be something that could come up if you do mock tests. If you're enjoying this video so far, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page. With as little as a $5 support, you can help us ensure that we can continue to produce high quality and high researched content. And at the same time, you get access to polls, extra videos, unlisted streams, and much more. Thank you so much. So absolutely do that. They come with keys. You can find them everywhere, including YouTube, and you should absolutely take advantage of this massive asset. Now let's talk about the spoken section of an international exam. Now, not all international tests come with a spoken section. For instance, even in the Mandarin one, HSK is only the written one with listening, and then you speak but in a microphone. And then the HSKK is the one that HSK is one thing. HSKK is the test that it's only focused on the spoken. But there are sometimes international certifications that don't even give you a spoken possibility. It's all about the written and listening ability, which to me is nonsense. It should always be included, but that's just me. If you look at like a City and Guilds of London or Cambridge, they do have their own separate spoken sections of the tests, and I always thought that it's good to prepare for those well. Now, of course, they are a lot shorter compared to the written form, but it's good because you don't have to dedicate too much time. It's not as tiring, but it also means you have less time to establish how good you are at the language. So here's a couple of tricks for the spoken part. Trick number 1, and I know this is going to sound weird, but don't worry about telling the truth. I know it's not nice when I say it this way, but I'm just trying to be practical with you. I'm just going to level with you. What do I mean by that? Let's say that the conversation goes into hobbies, and they ask you, okay, tell me about your hobbies. Okay, maybe that could be kind of a B1. It can also go all the way up to B2, but the way it's formulated and how much is expected of you changes. But traveling and hobbies tends to be something that you find from A2 all the way up to B2. So let's say that they ask you that, what's your hobby? And you have prepared for it. You thought, if they ask me that, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna talk about traveling because I love it. So you start talking. You start saying like, yeah, I love traveling. It's what I like doing. Of course, don't just give, do you like traveling? Yes. Great. I didn't test anything. You didn't prove anything. No, if people ask you, so tell me about your hobbies, traveling, and I love traveling because it's a great way to, I don't know, visit places, and I enjoy, for instance, and then if you run out of things to say about the concept, like you spoke about traveling in general, you said, I like it, it's a good way to learn new cultures, try new food, visit new places, it's beautiful, I love it, I get to practice my languages, I get to see new places, it's great. But then you don't know what else to say about it. Tell them about an instance of that. And this works with a lot of situations. I'll give you some other examples. So you don't really have to prepare it as much because you can prepare kind of a structure. So first tell them about the thing you're discussing and then give an example of the thing. So you could say, for instance, 2 years ago, I went to freaking China, I went to Ireland, I went to France and I had a great time there. We visited 2 cities. The first city we visited was Paris, right? So now you're giving them so that you don't run out of things to say if you have a structure prepared. You don't have to memorize the whole thing, but at least have a structure. What happens if the interlocutor asks you a follow-up question, which they will? So you told them about traveling, you told them that you went to Ireland, or England, or America, and you visited New York, and you went to this place, and you ate the hot dog and whatnot. And then they tell you, okay, who did you go with? That could be a follow-up question. Usually they have a few prepared, and they pick one. That's how it is. And then if they had already used like the easy one, because usually there is like a couple of easy one and one that it's slightly harder. And if they have already used the easy ones with the previous and you student or candidate, little bit of luck involved in there, they might ask you the harder one to you, and then but then maybe in the next section where they need to choose a question, they'll compensate by asking you the easiest one. But let's say that in this one they ask one such as, well, who did you go with? Tell me about them. And you want to tell them you went with your cousin because you did go with your cousin, but you cannot remember for the life of you the word cousin. Lie. I mean, I'm being dramatic here, but what I mean is, If you don't remember cousin, tell them you went with your brother. Right? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Tell them you went with the person that you remember. Okay? Because it's not like the test is going to go great, but then they're going to call your brother and say, excuse me, are you John? Yeah. Did you actually go to Ireland? No, it was my cousin. Oh, failed the exam. It's not going to happen, right? So telling the truth is wonderful always in life. But when it comes to tests, absolutely, it's easier. But if you don't remember the word that you need, if it's about purchasing, I want to give you another example. I want to get this real. This is real advice. If you're talking about shopping, do you go shopping? How often do you go shopping? And you say, oh yeah, for sure, absolutely. I went shopping yesterday. I went to the mall, and it was great. Bought a lot of things. And they ask you, what did you buy? And you want to tell them you bought a new laptop, but you can't remember the word laptop. Say you bought a radio, for crying out loud. It does not matter. It's a language exercise. Okay? It's not a lie test. So I'm saying, I said lie just to make an impression, to make it a little funny. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. You use the words you remember, because what happens, and I've seen it. I was an examiner, mate. I was an examiner. I've seen it happen. People freeze. People freeze because they want to say that they like football, but they don't remember the word football. Of course, this happens in the lower levels. And they get stuck. I really like, what was it? Why? Just tell me you like Olympic fencing. It's not like it's going to make a difference, So you got to be a little strategic about this. You don't remember a word, use something else. Doesn't matter if it's not true. So there's that. The next thing that I would like to say is, try not to repeat yourself too much. And this is something you might want to prepare beforehand. Memorizing entire paragraphs is not a great idea unless you are like a monster at memorization and you learned it so well it just sounds as fluent as an actor. Then by all means. Otherwise, the problem is, if not, which, there's a little anxiety, maybe you don't remember something, you can tell. So if someone has memorized a paragraph, first, it might not fit the question right, but then you try and force it in there. And that's not good because it sounds like you're going off topic. That decreases points. And this is the same, for example, for written exercises and not just for spoken ones. And then, if you start repeating your memorized thing and then you forget and then you need to revert back, reset and repeat again, it's not going to work. So maybe if you really want, memorize very small things. Don't memorize an entire paragraph because most likely it's not going to sound natural. But what you can do is, let's say that they have 4 questions in the first section. Okay, so they're going to ask you 4 questions. You don't know what those questions are. If you do a lot of mock tests, you can have an idea, but in general. Okay, well, how about you decide and you prepare this. For every first question, whichever the question is, I'm going to use the expression furthermore, or however, or thus, whichever you like. Or to be honest with you, it's just an expression. So if someone, let's see if we can fit it in there. It's just something you practice for. Every first question I'm going to fit, to be honest with you, in there. So let's say someone asks you, what's your dream job? You'd be like, there are a lot of jobs I'd like to do, but to be honest with you, I would love to become a teacher. Boom. But what if they asked you, do you like cars? Well, you could say, I like cars, but to be honest with you, I think I prefer bikes. Both are interesting, right? Really, it's easy and it's good. Is it really giving you points? Well, obviously, if you butcher the grammar and pronunciation and the words and you don't understand, it's not going to be like a saving grace. But if your English is decent, the fact that you're using an expression naturally because you've practiced it and you put it in the conversation correctly does give you points. Makes you sound like, man, this guy is good. So question number 2, you prepare another one. For instance, You could do if you will. It goes at the end of a statement. So you could say, someone asks you, why did you choose to learn English? You could say, hey, I decided to learn English because it gives you a lot of job opportunities, if you will. And, you can use it to communicate with a lot of people, and then continue the conversation a little more, because you want to kind of speak a little more. And then third, instead of if you will, you could do so to speak. Kind of functions the same way, put it at the end. And so if someone asks you a question such as, do you use a computer? How often do you use a computer in your daily life? You could say, well, computers are a phenomenal tool that we can use to study. You can use for entertainment. You can watch videos with it. You could play video games, so to speak. And that's why they are, in my opinion, a computer is an essential piece of equipment in your life, so to speak. Boom. Right. That really did up the level of the presentation. And I just did the first 3 that came to my mind, but you can choose 3 that really work with you, that you like. Okay, now, what happens if you're speaking, and this is another thing we're talking about, and then the examiner is ready to move on to the next question. So they ask you a question. It was about fish, meat, and vegetarianism, and you're talking about it. Maybe this is more of a P2 level item of conversation. You're like, yeah, vegetarians, I got a cousin who's vegetarian, and personally I'm not a vegetarian. I like meat. Wonderful. I eat McDonald's 15 times a day. Probably not the healthiest choice, but so you're talking, you feel like you're doing well, you're speaking fluently, but the examiner stops you. They're like, okay, so for the next question, I've seen students that ignore that because they feel like, no, you shouldn't stop me, I want to keep talking. Never do that. I say that as an examiner. Why? Because examiners, when they begin your spoken tests, they begin a recording, and they have to complete the test within a certain given time. Now, you don't know that, but you don't need to know that. What you need to know is that the examiner has its own time frame, and they need to respect it. It's just necessary. It's a part of the job. So if the examiner stops you, it means they think that you have answered enough. It's enough. It's good. It's sufficient. You don't have to keep going. But we do need to continue, because I need to finish the first 5 questions before the first 5 minutes. Otherwise, I won't have enough time for the next section. This is all in the examiner's head. So if they interrupt you, in theory, it's a good thing, because it means you've spoken sufficiently. Just stop. You don't want to kind of argue with the examiner. You want to be kind of mutually helpful, right? So you speak as much as you need to speak, but then if he tries to stop you, it doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It just means that it's time now, according to the schedule, to move to the next question. So if they try to interrupt you, it's not a bad thing. It's fine. Just stop. What happens if you don't speak enough? That's kind of an opposite scenario, but if during the test, the examiner asks you a question and he says, what's your favorite country? And you say, my favorite country is the United States of America because it's really nice. You will notice that's definitely not enough. It's not even for an A2, and maybe for an A2, but for a B1, absolutely not enough. And B2, it's ridiculous at that point. So what examiners will do, you can tell. They usually go, like, you can tell that they expect you to speak more. Continue. Because sometimes I've had students and candidates that do the other thing. They think, is this enough? Maybe I shouldn't speak. No, keep going. Keep going and keep speaking. Try to come up with things until the examiner stops you. That's usually good. But you can kind of tell, because there is a little bit of a body language with the exam. You can kind of tell if he or she expects you to keep speaking. But in general, you want to speak sufficiently. You just don't want to keep going and going and going too much, particularly after they stop you. If they stop you, you just got to stop. Pronunciation, I promised I was telling you about it. Of course, I'll have dedicated videos, but suffice to say, how important is pronunciation during a spoken test? And can you pass a test, and even with good grades, if you have a thick accent? All right. Or do you have to sound native? First and foremost, you don't have to sound native. You can pass a test, splendid marks, even if you don't sound native. Obviously, I don't sound native when I speak English. I still have, I hope, a light foreign accent. But what's important is that your accent, whichever it is, does not impede communication. So as long as you're clear and your accent doesn't just change the words and the vowels and the consonants so much that they are virtually recognizable and the examiner needs to ask you, I'm sorry, what? Could you repeat? What, could you say that again, please? If that happens, then yeah, you should have worked on that accent. Because if it's preventing communication, then it will remove points. It's going to happen. But as long as it's clear, even if it's like obvious from 5 kilometers away, and they can tell, yeah, this guy's from France, they're not going to take any point as long as there is clarity. Now, given, if you are a special case, right? If you're really good, you have excellent ear, maybe you did music, and you can tell, like, your pronunciation is just good, you're great at it. They will give you extra points for it. Like if you sound particularly good, like you're really good, you're almost native-like, then it will give you points because probably will connect to your fluency. Because personally, in my experience, I've almost never run into someone who has perfect pronunciation but just are not fluent, and it's usually a characteristic of a very high level. And obviously, I'm just going to say the obvious here, but if your pronunciation is fantastic, but your grammar is completely broken and you just don't understand the questions, then sorry, it's not going to do anything at that point. But as long as your grammar is correct, your English is good, it's relatively fluid, doesn't have to be fluent depending on the level, but it's relatively fluid and all of that, and it's correct. And you also, on top of that, you have an almost native-like pronunciation. And obviously, that's going to make you sound a lot more proficient, and so it's going to give you points. But do remember, it's not a requirement. As long as you're clear, even if you have a light accent, not a problem at all. You can pass and get excellent marks, in fact. All right, so there's really a lot to say when it comes to exams, and these are just a few aspects of how to do a test that really come from the experience from the other side, if you will. But I will make more if you're interested. This is just the first time that I talk about something like this on a video. So if it's something you're interested in, and if you watch until the end, goodness gracious, let me praise you for that. Do let me know in the comments, and I will make part 2, part 3, part 5, part 100. But I think today I'm going to leave it at this. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Bye.